In 1929, the aftermath of the First World War had shattered the economy, and fascism was spreading across Europe. People were desperate for a way out. Dr. Ritter and his wife Dora decided to leave Germany behind and move to the uninhabited island of Floriana, tucked away in the Galapagos archipelago. Whenever a ship passed nearby, Ritter sent out letters, sharing glimpses of their isolated life with the world. 1932, inspired by Ritter's pursuit of a better life, Margaret, her husband Heinz, and their son Harry sold all their belongings and made the journey to Floriana. Heinz showed them a newspaper, explaining that Ritter's letters had been published and that he had gained fame back in Germany. Ritter reminded them that he had come here to live in solitude, but reluctantly agreed to give Heinz a tour. "Come see my garden," he said. "Since we're strict vegetarians, this is our main source of food. Nothing about life here is magical. Do you realize how long it took me to clear this land? 12 months. No roads, no rivers, nothing. Just 2 small springs that collect rain. Why did you come?" Heinz assured him that they hadn't come to the island for leisure. The truth was, Harry had tuberculosis, and the family couldn't afford a sanatorium. Heinz had also heard that Dora was on the path to fully healing her sclerosis, but Ritter refused to reveal the method, insisting it would appear in his manuscript. Meanwhile, Dora spent time with Margaret while tending to the farm animals. She called her a child bride, pointing to the age gap with Heinz. "Heinz is not my son. I'm Heinz's second wife," she explained. Dora also warned her that most of the island's animals could be dangerous, and she confessed that Ritter despised the attention she gave the donkey, seeing her affection as a pointless need for validation. Afterward, Ritter led the family to a cave where they could spend the night. Their only water source was a tiny, trickling stream. When Ritter returned home, Dora confessed that she didn't like this family and reminded him that they had come to the island for isolation. Ritter gently removed bugs from her skin while revealing his real plan. He said, "I settled them in the caves." Over the next few days, the family worked tirelessly under the scorching sun to begin their new life. Heinz was determined, but it was clear that Harry and Margaret were struggling. At night, sleep was nearly impossible thanks to the relentless mosquitoes. One night, Heinz awoke from another strange dream. Margaret seized the moment to tell him she was pregnant. Heinz was overjoyed, but Margaret felt uneasy about bringing a child into such a harsh life. Suddenly, a noise interrupted them. Heinz ran to the other cave and discovered wild dogs devouring their supplies. He managed to scare them away, but it was too late. They had already eaten most of the food. After she left, the couple was gleeful, pleased to know the family was suffering, and celebrated their mischief in private. As the family continued moving their belongings by foot, a noise on the beach caught their attention. Ritter noticed it too, and using his binoculars, he saw a ship approaching. On board, Baroness Eloise prepared to make her grand entrance. "I am the embodiment of perfection," she declared. Her lovers, Rudolph and Robert, carried her to the beach, while her servant Manuel unloaded her enormous, lavish wardrobe. She scanned the area for the perfect spot and declared that this would be where they'd build their own resort. Then she and her lovers dashed off to celebrate, getting playful in the sea, while Manuel had to chase the wild dogs away. Moments later, Eloise and her men paid a visit to the couple. They even brought a chair for Eloise, and she expected Dora to kiss her hand, but Dora just lazily shook it. Ritter emerged from the bedroom without bothering to put on any clothes. Eloise called him a tamer of nature and praised his fame in various countries, even calling him the future of civilization. Since she planned to camp on the island, Ritter pointed out the closest source of water for her. Soon, Heinz and Margaret discovered Eloise and her men swimming in their pond. Rudolph grew aggressive, but Margaret explained that the pond was their drinking water. Eloise made him back off and apologized. "My sincere apologies. I was desperate to wash the salt off my body." After Heinz kissed her, Eloise shared her plan to build a resort on the beach. She mentioned that she would use their pond until her men could construct a proper well, and handed them some mail before leaving. Some of the letters were for Ritter, so Heinz delivered them to him. Ritter was furious, noticing the envelopes had been opened. He explained that Eloise could have handed him the letters directly, but she hadn't, to make it look like Heinz had opened them. Ritter pointedly remarked, "This is war." Later, Heinz went to see Eloise, who had captured a wild dog for security. Heinz asked why she had tried to turn him against Ritter. Eloise pointed out that Ritter had started it. He had sent her to Heinz's pond to provoke them, hoping they'd fight until they left. Then she showed Heinz a newspaper article about her resort, which would cater exclusively to millionaires. A few days later, Eloise passed by Ritter's house. "Good morning, Dr. Pig." What did you say? Say it to my face. Come on, say it to me now. Pig, 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 pig. At the same time, Hines spotted a cow and chased it all the way to the caves. With Margaret's help, they locked the cow up and celebrated having fresh milk for the first time.
By spring, Hines had completed half of an actual house, and Margaret managed to harvest their first real vegetable. Eloise appeared with her men and announced that they would be camping next to the family until the resort was ready. Margaret mentioned that she was pregnant and that the baby would need peace and quiet. Eloise countered, saying that babies also need community and promised to show hospitality. That night, Eloise partied with her men in her tent, disturbing the family with the noise. One morning, Ritter discovered that the pig had eaten all of his vegetables. Later, while showering, he heard a gunshot. Hines had a rifle and was hunting. Eventually, Ritter decided to visit the family, only to be disappointed to find that they were thriving. Their house was complete and their plants were flourishing. He offered some chickens in exchange for a cow head, and Hines agreed to the trade. Margaret asked Ritter if he would help her when the baby arrived, but Ritter snapped, launching into a philosophical rant and insisting it wouldn't end well. That night, Ritter cooked the cow head. Dora reminded him that they were supposed to be vegetarians and could survive on fruit from the trees until the garden grew again. An argument erupted, with both of them blaming each other for not doing enough. Meanwhile, Rudolph continued digging holes across the island, searching in vain for clean water. When he returned to the camp, he had to endure Eloise being naughty with Robert, a disturbance that had been bothering the family as well. Eloise requested a meal, and Rudolph informed her that there were no supplies left. She freaked out, insisting that she only eats foods from home. Rudolph yelled at her as she blamed him for poor planning. Eloise ran into the woods to cry. She was soon found by Harry, who had to listen as she rambled about believing in yourself. She convinced him to run with her, and Harry was thrilled. His breathing problems rarely allowed him to do anything so energetic. When they finished, she got him to talk and discovered that the family still had canned supplies. Sometime later, Margaret was alone in the house and began feeling contractions. At the same time, Robert and Manuel sneaked into the cave to steal supplies. Margaret left the house yelling for help, while the men continued their theft. Her contractions worsened and she collapsed, rushing back into the house, forcing the men to hide. After laying down some sheets, Margaret prepared to give birth and noticed blood on her underwear. A noise outside drew her attention, prompting her to go out again to search for her husband, allowing the men to escape. Smelling the blood, wild dogs suddenly surrounded her and she had to fend them off with a broom. In the tent, Eloise complained that the stolen goods weren't enough to last long. Manuel told her about Margaret's situation and wanted to help. Even Rudolph sided with him. But Eloise refused to let anyone leave, insisting they were there only to serve her. Then, Margaret's water broke and she screamed at the top of her lungs as she gave birth. She had to keep the baby close because the dogs were circling, threatening to attack him. At that moment, Harry and Hines returned and scared the dogs away with gunshots. Margaret feared the baby was dead, but Hines gently patted him until he cried. Exhausted, Margaret passed out. Hines ran into Ritter for help. Ritter initially refused, but Dora forced him to intervene. After a quick check, Ritter discovered that the placenta was stuck in the uterus. Using hot water and a spoon, he removed it. The process was painful, but saved Margaret's life. Meanwhile, Manuel spied on them from a window and reported back to Eloise, who demanded to know why he hadn't stopped the doctor. Offended, Manuel explained that he came as a builder, not to harm anyone, and called her evil. One afternoon, Eloise brought Margaret a can of food as a gift for the baby and apologized for Manuel, claiming he had been a thief and she had sent him away to the boat. She held the baby high and invited the family to lunch. Later, when Margaret asked Hines to go, he refused, not believing Manuel's story and knowing Eloise was behind the robbery. Margaret changed his mind by pointing out that refusing would anger Eloise, who seemed dangerous. During lunch, Eloise sang and danced for everyone, but only Harry enjoyed it. Ritter had to put on his fake teeth to eat, and everyone learned that he had removed his real teeth upon arriving on the island to prevent infections. While Hines continued complaining that every dish was stolen, Eloise noticed Dora watching the baby and tried to talk about the birth. The guests quickly shifted the subject, and Eloise continued tossing passive-aggressive comments, making everyone uncomfortable. For a while, nobody fell for her provocations, but eventually Ritter snapped and revealed that Dora couldn't have children. Feeling exposed, Dora attempted to leave, only to be blocked by the guard dog. Eloise called the dog back, and as Dora finally left, Ritter started shouting that he wanted Eloise off his island, threatening to kick her out himself. Suddenly, Eloise pulled out a gun and showed him papers from the governor of the Galapagos Islands declaring that the island belonged to her. Unable to resist, everyone retreated. When the family returned home, they found Ritter waiting. He offered them food in exchange for a rifle. After the exchange, Ritter left, and Hines asked Margaret about some of Eloise's comments. Margaret admitted that she had only married him because he proposed and she wanted to escape her terrible home. That night, Ritter shot the pig that kept attacking his garden. By summer, a drought struck the island, and the family's pond dried up. Ritter made great strides with his writing, but eventually hit a wall with writer's block.
One afternoon, Rudolph begged the family for food, explaining he hadn't eaten in days. They agreed to feed him, and in return, he shared a secret. Eloise had stolen everything, from movies, accents, and mannerisms, to stories and even the title of Baroness. Her parents had kicked her out because all she knew was shopping. She traveled across Europe, ran out of money in Paris, and was forced to work as a cheap feather dancer. Rudolph returned to the tent. Eloise was panicking because she was out of cigarettes. She smelled food on Rudolph's mouth and yelled at him for befriending the enemy. Rudolph insulted her, and Eloise slapped him. He slapped her back. A furious Robert then pushed Rudolph down and beat him up. Sometime later, a yacht arrived on the island. Alan, a friend of Ritter's, had brought supplies. As an explorer and Hollywood director, he even had his own crew and camera. When Eloise met him, she thought she had found the solution to our problems. That night, Alan organized a fancy dinner for everyone. A band played beautiful music, and Margaret cried, so Eloise put water in her eyes to imitate her. Suddenly, a volcano erupted on a nearby island, and everyone marveled at the view. Ritter noticed Eloise constantly pursuing Alan and feared he would ruin him. Determined, he quickly moved to steal some food from Eloise's supplies. Dora tried to stop him, reminding him of the philosophies guiding their lives, but he ignored her. In private, Eloise tried to kiss Alan, but he turned her down. Then she pretended her chest hurt to place his hand over her heart. Claiming there was only one cure for loneliness, she attempted to use his hand for pleasure. Alan, however, started laughing and explained he could tell she wasn't really rich before leaving. Afterward, Rudolph wondered if Eloise had asked Alan to take him away as promised, but Eloise told him that Alan would be investing in her resort. Then she noticed her boxes were empty. In the morning, she watched Alan sail away and lost all hope. Moments later, Ritter discovered that all his supplies had been stolen. He visited the family and asked them to choose sides. Ritter and Hines then armed themselves and confronted Eloise, threatening her to return the stolen goods. In response, Robert drew a gun. Margaret and Harry rushed to intervene, trying to prevent bloodshed. A furious Ritter went home and shot his typewriter, leaving Dora very disappointed. He announced he was going hunting and took the last of the usable supplies, leaving only spoiled food for the chickens. Meanwhile, Rudolph dined with the family. Eloise came looking for him, and Margaret told him to ignore her, but Rudolph agreed to speak with her. She surprised him by offering food and clothes, saying he could leave if he wanted. He kissed her and asked if there was anything he could do before he went. Suddenly, the family heard a noise and thought the pig was eating their plants. Hines rushed out, firing his gun. When he grabbed the lantern, he was horrified to discover he had killed Dora's donkey. Rudolph watched the scene unfold from the shadows. The next morning, Dora found her chickens sick and her donkey gone. She visited the family and they explained that someone had killed the animal, but omitted the details. Grieving, Dora collapsed and Hines helped her back home. In private, Hines told Ritter what had really happened. While they argued, they spotted Robert in the tall grass. The spy fled and the men agreed they had to take sides. "You were right. It's time to choose sides." Since Robert had only overheard their argument, he reported to Eloise that her plan had succeeded. In the woods, Ritter and Hines found Rudolph. She made me. She told me I could go home." When Hines returned home, he asked Margaret and Harry to collect grass from the valley to reinforce the roof. Then, armed, the men went to confront Eloise again. Robert immediately attacked, using his youth to overpower Hines and Ritter. Rudolph stabbed Robert's hand with a knife, and Robert brought him down, trying to stab back. Hines pulled him off and after a struggle, stabbed him repeatedly until he died. Eloise emerged and hugged Hines, claiming she had been Robert's victim all along. When nobody believed her, she offered to share ownership of the island, but Ritter silenced her with a shot to the head. Margaret heard the shot from afar and grew suspicious. Afterward, the bodies were thrown into the sea, and the men agreed not to tell their wives the truth. That night, it finally rained again, and Margaret comforted Hines as he drowned in guilt. The next morning, Rudolph pretended he had found a letter from Eloise, claiming she and Robert had left the island. Dora grew suspicious, knowing Eloise had left many belongings behind. Ritter bought many of those items from Rudolph to have money ready for the next ship, revealing that he had written to the governor and they would receive a visit soon. Margaret confronted Hines privately, pointing out that Ritter would probably blame him for the murder when the governor arrived, so they needed a plan. When Ritter returned home, Dora announced she was leaving him, claiming he had ruined their cause. Ritter freaked out and grabbed pliers to rip out her rotten tooth against her will. Afterward, Dora went for a walk in the woods and bumped into Margaret, who told her that Ritter had killed Eloise and warned her he was dangerous. Dora didn't listen. Before leaving, Margaret gave her some healthy chickens and warned her not to cook her sick ones, as the bad meat could infect others. Meanwhile, a ship sailed near the island. Rudolph immediately jumped into the water and offered the captain all his money until the man threw him a lifesaver. When Dora returned home, she found Ritter finally writing again. To celebrate, she cooked the sick chickens and let Ritter eat, excusing herself from the meal, claiming her mouth still hurt. A few hours later, Ritter was in terrible pain, and Dora asked the family for help. There was nothing they could do, and it seemed she only wanted witnesses. With his last energy, Ritter cursed Dora before collapsing and dying. In autumn, the governor arrived with a few soldiers. Eloise's murder was in the newspapers, and Ritter's final letter had claimed Heinz was responsible. Dora confirmed the story. However, Margaret explained that Ritter had been murdered too. She revealed the food poisoning was caused by the sick chickens, and that she had given Dora healthy chickens the day before, meaning she had made a conscious choice. The governor ended up arresting Dora instead. Before leaving, he asked the family if they wanted to come with him, but Margaret assured him they were happy to remain alone. This story is based on true events. Eloise and Robert's bodies were never found. Dora published a book about the island's events before dying in 1943 of sclerosis. Margaret later published her own book, contradicting everything Dora had written. Rudolph never made it to the mainland. The boat ran out of fuel and drifted off. His and the captain's bodies were found later. Margaret lived on the island until her death in 2000, at the age of 96. Her descendants still live there today and run a small tourist hotel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.